Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Bednars, and I am a junior doctor in Dundee, Scotland. And you're listening to the Patient Will See You Now podcast. I have to say, this podcast is for educational use only, and you should not be using this as medical advice or opinion. Please go see your doctor if you have any medical questions. This podcast is supposed to be fun and educational. So now that I got that out of the way, let's get into this week's topic. Hey everyone, this is Robert, and on this week's episode, we'll be talking about juvenile idiopathic arthritis, or JIA for short. It can also have the same name as juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, but to keep it as simple as possible here, we'll just stick to JIA. Basically, juvenile idiopathic arthritis means arthritis, but for kids with an unknown cause. It's an autoimmune inflammatory disease that usually affects the joints of the body, like the ankles, wrists, knees, hips, fingers, by a progressive erosion of articular cartilage and bone. It can also affect the body systemically, causing people to have fevers and a rash to go along with the arthritis, and also uveitis, which is just a type of inflammation in the eye. In JIA, kids are usually diagnosed between the ages of 1 to 6, but can develop as late as 15 years old as well. Females tend to be more affected than males, and about 1 in 1,000 children are affected with the disease, so it's actually not so uncommon. JIA can be categorized into three main types, and they are oligoarticular, which just means fewer than 6 joints are affected, and this happens to be the most common type, fortunately. Polyarticular, which means more than 6 joints, and systemic, which can have symptoms that affect the whole body. There are other types as well, but we won't mention them here since they aren't as common, and we're trying to keep this simple. It is a painful disease, and it also has a characteristic flare ups, which can cause more pain to the affected joints. Classically, a person with JIA will have most of their pain and stiffness in the morning, progressively getting better as they move around and as the day goes on. If severe enough, JIA can also cause growth problems as well. Unfortunately, there is no cure for JIA. However, there are ways to manage the pain so that it won't be as bad for the patient. Usually, we start with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs, like ibuprofen and naproxen. And if that doesn't work, then we move on to the bigger guns like corticosteroid injections into the joint that's affected, or immunosuppressants like methotrexate. And then we go into the biggest ones like biologicals, and they're just antibodies that are man made to help suppress the immune system, just like etanercept, which is called Enbrel, and adalimumab or Humira. Surgery is not always indicated in people with JIA. However, it can be indicated for extremely severe cases or to improve joint movement. Key players in helping those with JIA are occupational therapists and physical therapists as they help them cope and manage their day to day activities. But seriously, without them, it'd be really tough for doctors dealing with people who have JIA. The occupational therapists and physical therapists are definitely the lifesavers here. They do a great job in managing these patients, as well as many other patients. There really isn't much else for me to explain about JIA other than some boring diagnostic factors you'd find in bloods and imagings and certain criterias that I wouldn't be able to show you without actually showing you a picture and video. So the best thing to do now is to listen to Catherine, who I've had the pleasure of speaking with, who is a 19-year-old girl who's had JIA since she was 2 years old, and listening to her journey and what it's like living with juvenile idiopathic arthritis.
Hey, sorry, I didn't have my microphone on.
That's totally fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. So, this is Robert from the Patient Will See You Now podcast. And how about you? Let's just start with you telling us just your name and how old are you, and a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Catherine Cox. I'm 19 years old. Um, I live in South Georgia. I'm a college student at a state college down here, and I work at two jobs, and that pretty much sums me up right there.
Sounds good. I really love that southern drawl that you have there, though. That that Georgia drawl. I love it. So you emailed me telling me that you have something called juvenile idiopathic arthritis, right?
Yes, I do.
So how about just for I explained it a little bit before earlier, but how about you just let us know in your definition of what it is and how it's affected your life? Like, what symptoms did you have? I know that it started at a young age, but you can explain that as well. At what age this all started? How was it figured out? And we'll take it from there.
Sure. So I was diagnosed at 2.5. I think well, what I've been told is that it began by me just not being able to walk up the stairs. I couldn't dress myself and, do things that the normal 2-year-old can do. So they took me to my family healthcare doctor, and she actually has rheumatoid arthritis. So she knew immediately what it was and sent me to the rheumatologist. And kind of from there, I've been on and off injections. And, the symptoms kind of like come up at random times. I'll definitely, when it gets really cold down here, my joints will swell and I'll have a hard time moving. I get very stiff in the morning and kind of things like that.
So, when did you realize it affected your like? What at what age do you feel like you remember that this was? Oh, this is actually an issue. This hurts. This is a problem.
Um, Honestly, I would probably say maybe fourth or fifth grade. I would have a hard time getting down the school hallways, and it really just became kind of a mobility issue at that point, and I would have to get to my classes a little slower than most kids. It but that's when I kind of realized that it was more a part of my life than what I would have known before as a smaller child. But kind of handled it throughout middle school pretty easily. But in high school, it definitely became a bigger issue with the bigger workload and everything. We got one of those school plans that helps you with accommodations and things. So I would get accommodations for all that kind of stuff, like writing. I didn't have to write my essays if I didn't want to. I could type it if my hands were hurting. And I would get a late pass to class if I was having a flare up.
How do you feel that that they look at you and they say, "Oh, since you have these flare ups, you can type it up." Do you feel like they were feeling bad for you, for pity, or did you actually feel like, "Oh, thank you so much for realizing that I have this and this is an issue"?
Well, for the most part, it was not very difficult. A lot of I didn't really talk to anybody in high school because I just didn't want to, as bad as that sounds. So it wasn't really much of a social issue, but the friends that I did have were very understanding of it. Um, However, I do remember this one time in high school. I was sitting in history class typing up an essay getting ready for the AP exams, and a girl came in, and I had been having to sit in her seat because I got extended time, so they were preparing me for it as I would take the test in the testing time zone. And she was extremely hostile about me being in her seat, and I tried to explain it to her, but she was just not having it. And that was really the only time I kind of remember anybody being kind of ignorant and hostile about it.
Ah, that's terrible. But we always have to deal with those types of people. I guess there are some good ones and bad ones out there.
Oh, yes.
You say that you have a hard time getting down the hallways and stuff. Can you explain exactly what you're feeling when you're going through the hallways or getting into that chair or into that desk? What is it exactly?
Yes. So my hips would really hurt for the most part. It kind of feels like a stinging but also dull pain at the same time. Um, and it just kind of follows you throughout wherever you go. Or if you take a wrong step, it will run down through your leg and into your knees. And it's not very fun when it hits your knees or anywhere, honestly. But just that burning kind of sharp pain just comes out of nowhere. Occasionally, like I sat down in my chair today and I had this awful pop in my hip, um, and it just kind of burst throughout my entire leg area. That's kind of what that would feel like. I guess if I had to put that in words, I don't think I've ever had anybody ask that.
So if you had to measure it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute worst pain you've ever felt, what's like an average day for you? At what number would you give it?
I would probably say 4 to 5. I don't think it ever really goes away, but there's definitely days where I cannot move at all, and I would probably put those at the 10. So on a scale, probably 4 to 5.
And what do you do when it does get really bad and these flare-ups happen? Do you take any certain kinds of medications at that moment, or do you do something to make it feel better?
So I usually go to the doctor immediately, and she puts me on prednisone for a while just to get it back under control. Tylenol and ibuprofen haven't really been working for a good while now. Um, I take naproxen every day for the inflammation, so that helps sometimes, and I can definitely tell when I don't take it. But she also will occasionally give me Flexeril just because when I'm sleeping at night, sometimes I do get all scrunched up and stiff, and it does put a strain on my muscles and causes some of those issues.
And when you mentioned the prednisone, are these injections or tablets?
They are tablets, and I've been on the liquid, but that tastes awful, so I really prefer the tablets.
So you mentioned that earlier when you were young, you were getting injections. What injections were these?
For a long time, I was on Enbrel, um, and that was really, really good. And up until I want to say middle school, maybe seventh grade or so, they switched me over to Humira. Um, and I was on that for maybe 2 or 3 years before I went back into remission and ended up getting off of those. And maybe 14 or 15, I came back on Enbrel, and just recently, like maybe 3 weeks ago, they took me back off of it.
So are you currently not on any of those biologics anymore? You're not on Enbrel or Humira?
Correct. I go back to the doctor in January to see if they will be putting me on a different one.
So does that mean you're currently in remission?
Honestly, I don't know how to answer that 100%. My SID rate is not showing that it's high. However, the Enbrel has came back on test results that it's not working anymore, and my body is actually working against it, and that's why I've kind of had the flare up over the past couple of months that I've been having. So I don't know if he would call me in remission since my SID rate is high or not high.
So how would you feel? So I know that we can base off flare-ups and remissions off of these sedimentation rates and numbers and just like that. But how do you feel currently? Do you feel like this is a remission era of your JIA, or or do you feel like it's never been in remission and you just always feel it?
I do feel like there were times when it was in remission, but currently, right now, I don't think it is. I have too much of pain throughout the day and at night for it to be able to be in remission and me be able to do normal things without having to think about it. I would think of remission as it not being such a big part of my day when it is at this point, if that makes sense.
And you said you're currently 19 years old, right?
Right.
And you've had this for as much as you remember your whole life.
Yes, I have.
Has having JIA made you miss opportunities or miss any social events, or like, how do you feel, I guess, in general with having it? Did it affect your social life as well? Anything like that?
Absolutely. I have been told that I was in gymnastics at the time and actually had to drop out of that. So I wasn't able to play in sports, and in middle school and elementary school and high school, things like that are important. And that was very difficult not to be able to run in that sort of crowd that I wanted to be in. And I know that a lot of people with this disease often feel like that. Um, and it definitely took a toll as for making friends and stuff. But the friends that I did have, definitely understood. I do remember my 10th birthday party. I ended up getting hurt. I wasn't hurt, but I was hurting. So we ended up having to basically shut the party down so that I could go lay down. And that definitely is something that I feel like I don't think it was talked about, but just as a little kid, you always think it was talked about. So I know that it's difficult for me to be 100% honest with people when you aren't sure how they're going to react to it at that age.
Do you have friends from when you were younger that are still with you today that understand it completely what it's like? Or were there people that were just like, oh, you're a burden, I don't want to deal with this? Or did you have a mixed bag of these types of people in your life?
As well, for my close friends, I would say they never really did anything like that. I have had my best friend since 6th grade, and we've been so close throughout this entire thing, and I'm extremely open with her about how I feel and what hurts and when I can go and do things, and she's extremely understanding of that, and that's something pretty rare to find. Um, but she has just been absolutely wonderful with it. I don't really think anybody has been like, "Oh, no, I'm not going to be your friend because of it." But it's also, you can kind of tell when people are scooting away and don't want to necessarily invite you to things because you can't, or when you say you can't, like if I can't go and do something this time, I probably won't be invited back next time.
And how do you feel about that?
It used to really hurt my feelings, but at this point in my life, I just kind of learned to, it's part of me. If I can do it, I'll do it. If not, it's fine. Um, but definitely as a smaller child, it was definitely very hurtful and kind of traumatic, sort of thing.
So you would definitely, you just want to be in control of that decision. Like let them invite you to whatever it is that they're going to do, and you can be the one to decide whether you think you can handle it or not. Or you don't want them to be like, oh, we're doing this, you can't do it, we're just not going to invite you. There's no point.
Right, because I'm the only one that knows my limits.
Exactly. And you said you mentioned you were into gymnastics. Do you do any kind of sport now, or is it just way too difficult to do sports, or how does that look like? Because I know you sound like a person that you want to be active. You like being active. Do you do anything now in terms of sports?
I don't do anything currently. In 10th or 11th grade, I tried to run cross country and ended up having to go into physical therapy because of how bad it was hurting my body. But I can't do things like running really hard, or my daughter will get on to me. And that's something that I did enjoy. But it's definitely very hard down here to find a group to where you can exercise your needs for somebody with arthritis. If Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. You also mentioned earlier that you know a lot of people who have GIA. Who are these people? Do you where do you find these people?
So there is a camp here in Georgia called Camp Akeaway. It's up in Winder near Athens and Atlanta and everything. And it's a camp for just kids with all of the different kinds of arthritis, and it's a pretty great community. When I was younger, I was definitely into that. I think I went 2 or 3 years before I just ended up not being able to go back, just with everything happening, family life, and all that kind of stuff. But I went back last year and reconnected with those people and learned a lot of new people that I thought were very interesting, and just kind of was excited to see that there was this whole community of people out there who were like me that weren't, 80 years old.
This is actually really interesting. There's a whole camp dedicated for kids who have arthritis.
Oh yeah,
And
the entire camp does like so many other kinds of camps for kids with disabilities too.
so, just speaking about arthritis, what kind of things do you do at this camp? What how many people are there? How many kids did you actually meet? Where are they from? Is it just a local thing? Oh, this is really interesting, actually.
Yeah, so all of these kids are mostly from around Georgia. We do have some from out of state. I think the furthest we had um, was Florida, like middle of Florida, that came up, and Winder is like up in North Georgia. Um, but we did all the kinds of things that you would think you do at a normal kind of summer camp. We'd rock climb. There was fishing, paddleboarding, swimming. We did like big play wars with like water and everything like that, and arts and crafts and music and dancing. So it wasn't really different from other camp, but the thing that really made it in arthritis camp is that every night all of our kids would have to go and get their medicine, or in the morning they'd have to go and get their medicine, or at lunchtime. And you had all of these different schedules of these kids having to take their medicine, which really put things into perspective when, I only have to take medicine once a day. Um, but it was they really hone in on that kind of care as a summer camp for kids with arthritis. And there are people going around with ice packs and ibuprofen just waiting for a kid that needs help.
And it's completely fine and normal because everybody knows exactly what kind of pain and what they're feeling exactly at that moment. So they know that, like, oh, this kid's got an ice pack. I totally get your pain, or they need to go get their medications. I totally get it. Uh, and you also mentioned that every kid is, I guess, kind of different with their medication regime. That you see that some of them get it 3 times a day. You said you only get it once a day. So you also see that every child there with JIA is a little bit different.
Oh yeah, it was a very humbling experience, and to what you think other people go through, and seeing that these kids they want to go get their medicine with other kids to be there for them and all that kind of stuff. And they were excited to see and who had the same medicines and what it was doing to them and who they were going to see, and if their doctor was the same doctor. It was definitely a warming kind of feeling.
That actually sounds really nice, actually. So now that you're at the age of 19, is it still considered JIA, or do you kind of switch over to arthritis? Is it rheumatoid arthritis now? Does it change in the doctor world? I'm actually not sure about this.
I actually don't know either. I've tried to ask, and we really don't know. Um, at this point, I just tell them RA, and usually they'll say, "Well, you're too young to have RA," or they say, "Wow, you're so young," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're telling me." um, but at this point, I just call it RA, and if anybody asks for more detail, I'll tell them JRA.
And in terms of your management, so currently, what are you taking now for managing your JIA?
Um, Probably just naproxen at this point and prednisone. Now the antidepressants that I've been on for over the past year have definitely kept it under control, just with the hormones and things that can make your body flare up. Um, so I guess sort of those medicines, but they aren't really for the arthritis. They just definitely help.
And so, with the naproxen that you're taking and the prednisone, have you experienced any side effects because of it? I'm going more towards the prednisone because I know that can cause a lot of side effects.
Oh yeah, with prednisone, I tell everybody that I have 3 stages, and I go through a different phase each time, and it always rotates between three. They're super hungry, super angry, and super hyper. It's never the same, and I always go between the three on a different dosage.
So it's always one of the three. It's never like is it ever a combination of the two or three or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, usually if I'm pretty hungry, I'm not really focused on everybody else, and that's really what I'm thinking of. Or if I'm hyper, I'm not upset or hungry, I'm focused on that. Or if I'm angry, I just need to go lay down in my room for a while.
So does that also affect your personal life as well? On top of the arthritis that you have, I'm guessing these side effects don't help anymore. Or do you feel like the benefit of the medicines outweighs the side effects of the medicines that you're getting?
I would say the benefit outweighs. As for the side effects kind of affecting my personal life, I know that super angry has an effect on my family is as they're probably not too happy with me as I'm getting upset about the smallest things, which I hate to say it, but it's it's just not very easy to control in that moment, I guess, which is terrible to say. Um, but they definitely handle it very well.
But it's totally understandable. Like you're taking these medications, and on top of that, you have arthritis, and it's completely okay for you to be angry, and it should be understandable. So I'm guessing your friends and your family understand when you get like this, that they understand that this is just a short phase. This isn't you. This is just the medications or arthritis talking, and it'll go away soon.
Oh yeah, and it definitely has turned into that at my workplace as well. They all know. Well, I work at the pharmacy that I get my medicine from, so they all know when I'm on prednisone and can expect which mood it is pretty quickly. Um, So that's definitely something that is kind of in that category as well.
So on top of all this, you're taking the medications, you're on top of it, and you also see your doctor how often?
Well, it usually goes from every 6 months to every year, just depending on where I'm at. Right now, it's been every 6 months for the past couple of, I guess, two or three times I've been.
And is there any big changes that go on? Like, have you ever felt like the doctors were thinking, "Oh, you're getting much better now. We can lean off this medication," or "Oh no, this is getting worse." Does it go up and down, or is it kind of steady throughout the years?
Well, it mostly goes from like kind of maintaining to bad. It never really goes from bad to good and up and down. It just kind of goes from maintaining it and keeping my pain at a low level. Definitely some days are better than others, but it just kind of stays at a normal pace of bearable.
Yeah, I understand absolutely. So what keeps you going through this whole time? Because I think, as you know, having this, there's unfortunately at the moment there's no cure for it. This is a lifelong thing. Is this something that you know that you've accepted that this is going to be on forever? That you know that you're going to be dealing with this for a very long time.
Yeah, it was something that I struggled with for a really long time. But being able to talk about it with a therapist and my family, it is something that you just kind of have to accept and, not wallow in self pity because that's not the life that I want to live. It definitely makes me choose the people I want to be around wisely. I always tell my boyfriend, "You're gonna have to give me my shots when I'm old and can't give them to me by myself." And he laughs at me and says, "Probably not." And I'm like, "No, you really are. Like, that's not a joke." um, but it's just something that I have accepted and realized that it is going to be with me forever.
But you've gotten to the point where you've accepted this is lifelong, but you understand that it is manageable. That there are medications that try to really reduce the symptoms and the flare ups as much as it can, that you can still live a normal life and you can still enjoy yourself and you can still enjoy what everyone else can enjoy. Maybe not crazy like martial arts or gymnastics that you see, but you can still enjoy it to a certain level of where it can keep you happy.
Oh, absolutely. I think as long as you know your limitations and everything that you should be able to do whatever you want to be able to do. Since I was little, they've came out with so many more medicines. So I'm really optimistic coming up as, there's so many things out there that we can try to get this completely under control and back to, just cruising.
Now we're going to wrap this up slowly, and what I usually ask all the people that are on the show is basically for anybody who has JIA, whether they're listening to this and they not that they just found out, because obviously you get this at a very young age, but maybe they've had it and they don't understand it completely, or maybe it's somebody listening who knows somebody that has JIA. What kind of advice would you give to those two people to know to understand more about JIA? What kind of advice would you give to the person who has it and to the person who found out they know somebody who has it?
Yeah, I know I keep saying know your limitations, but I think that is the best thing that you can do. Try things and always see how your body feels afterwards. And if, you are hurting the next day and you can't do anything, then you know that you have to pull back a little bit and you can't do that as much. I actually knew a girl who thought she was being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and the best thing that I could do was just tell her that I'm here and give her the support and know what she needs. Well, you can't really know what she needs, but just kind of help her out and listen to what she's saying, and things like that. And definitely voice what you're feeling. I know that I've had a hard time struggling with that, but since I've really told people what I've been feeling and what hurts, it's definitely been easier to come out and be able to say, "Hey, I can't do that," or "Hey, I'm not feeling good. I can't come today." Just kind of voice it and know what you can and can't do.
Catherine, I'd like to thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. I really hope that people will know or at least hear about juvenile idiopathic arthritis and understand more of what it's like, and just to raise more of this awareness and help others, and especially those people that live around Georgia who have it and they want to go to this camp. That's awesome. I hope they find out about it through this podcast and go to it as well. If you leave me a link of the camp, I'll leave it with the show notes as well. And again, I'd like to thank you so much for being on here and talking about your journey with JIA. Is there anything else that you would like to say on the show?
I don't think so. I appreciate you having me.
Great. So, Catherine, thank you so much. And I hope all is well. And I hope there's new medications that will even better manage your JIA. And I hope you do everything that you want to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you liked this episode, please leave a review and also make sure to subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're listening to this on so you can catch the future episodes as well. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, please send me an email with a background of what disease you're living with to thepatientwillseeyounow@gmail.com, and I'll let you know if you're selected to be on the show. Don't worry if I haven't gotten back to you right away, because I might get you back for a later show. And if your condition was already mentioned on the show, no worries. I like to show how one disease can affect different people in completely different ways. Again, thank you so much for listening, and catch you next week.